Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited for our interview and kind of getting a little bit of your expertise feedback on a topic that we haven't talked much about, but I think it's kind of new and floating out there, and people may know that it's beneficial, but not necessarily know much about it. So we'll get there. But what I would love for you to do is share with our listeners a little bit about what you're currently doing with your IHP certification, and then we'll kind of back it up, maybe talk about how you got there and so on and so forth.
Alrighty, so I am currently working as a bioresonance practitioner with an online clinic. And this is what the whole clinic focuses on. It's kind of like physics meets physiology. So I am working as one of their practitioners. I can meet with clients all over the world. I would say that most of my clients are in the USA, but I have people in Israel and Scotland and all over the place. So that's what I'm currently doing.
That's great. And have you always been in the health and wellness field? Is this something that you've always kind of been into, or something that fell into your lap in a different way?
So I do not have this long background in health and wellness. I originally went to college and got my degree in biology. I was pre-med, that was my plan. And then the more I started to study biology, particularly microbiology, the more I started to question whether or not I was actually interested in how diseases manifest or the pathogens themselves. I started to fall in love with, parasites and bacteria and whatnot. So I kind of had a freak out moment my senior year of what am I going to do? Is it medicine? Is it science? I don't even know what I could do with a science degree. So I decided I would take a gap year. Okay, it was supposed to be a year. Didn't end up that way, but I would just take whatever kind of fell into my lap. And that happened to be working for one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And I had many different roles while I was there. I worked as a lab technician. I worked as a microbiologist. And then I also worked with their supplies inspection area. So I got to see a lot of different areas of the industry. But all during this time, I was having my own health issues. So I had struggled since a teenager with terrible, terrible menstrual cycles, horrible anxiety, little bit of just mild depression and kind of having intrusive thoughts. And I just thought it was normal because a lot of my friends would also have very similar symptoms. And everyone tells you, especially as a woman, your period's just supposed to be bad. So I thought, oh, okay. So not being able to walk and vomiting from pain, that's normal. And then I started to talk to my parents a little bit, who are both healthcare workers. And they said, oh no, Hannah, that is not normal. Something is wrong. So while I was working for this pharmaceutical company, I was pursuing, care from the allopathic medical system. And I had an OBGYN who I just really didn't feel like was listening to me at all. She started saying that something was actually wrong with my bladder, that she thought I had interstitial cystitis, even though I had no symptoms of that whatsoever. So I felt really discouraged and kind of stuck because all they really told me was, well, you're already on birth control, and that's pretty much all we can do for these type of symptoms. I was having endometriosis-like symptoms. So I thought, well, this is just my lot in life. I don't really know what else I can do. And then literally by random happenstance, I ended up meeting an MD who practices functional medicine. And we were having dinner one night and I was just talking about my various symptoms. And she looked at me and she said, you have parasites. And I thought, you're crazy, because I took a parasitology course in college. They told me that in the United States, that wasn't really a concern. It was only third world countries that had parasites. I wasn't out drinking random water from creeks up in the mountains. So I thought, surely I could not have parasites. However, at this point, I was just so desperate for relief. I thought, I'll try anything. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work and I keep trying something else. So before I did the parasite cleanse, I was really showing my liver some attention. I had some symptoms of probably my liver being a little bit congested. I was very, very sensitive to things like alcohol, caffeine, and headaches quite often. So those can kind of go back to the liver. So I did a little bit of liver cleansing, which I had never heard of before. I was taking herbals that I knew nothing about to prepare my body for the parasite cleanse, because you don't ever just want to jump into a parasite cleanse. And then I started the cleansing process. And for starters, it was insane to actually see parasites. I thought, this is just insane. But after I finished the cleanse, my symptoms probably got 90% better. So I was really surprised at that point. And also while I was doing this cleanse, I was trying to clean up my diet. So I was really, really heavily limiting things like dairy and gluten and processed sugars and whatnot. I was trying to eat a lot cleaner than I ever had before. I'm from the South, so we love gluten and dairy and sugar, and it's not always the easiest thing to cut out. But I was also cleaning up my diet during this time, and I just felt so much better and full of life. And not only was I getting to the point where my periods were pain-free, but they also were regular. So I had had irregular periods my whole life where I would have 2 periods a month for a week straight each time. And I was iron deficient. Hello, I was bleeding too much. Like I needed that iron. So the fact that it was, regulating, I don't know, my eyes were open to this whole realm. And I thought, there's got to be more to this. And there were a few other things that I still wanted to work on. So I thought, what's this about functional medicine? And then I started to learn about integrative health and naturopathic medicine, all of these different categories that can kind of be bundled. And I actually had decided I was going to pursue naturopathic medicine. I was going to become a naturopathic doctor. So I moved to Arizona with my husband to pursue that. And then before classes were going to start, I just felt an unease in my system about some of the things that were happening with the school. And I was questioning whether or not I really wanted to take that path, because naturopathic medical school, it's like traditional medical school. So you have 4 years of school and then you have residency, and it's expensive. It's the cost of a regular medical school. And, my husband and I are big proponents of financial freedom. So that was really stressful. And I was on this whole Instagram space, and I had seen people that had the initials IHP. And I thought, what is that? Let me look into it and see. And there's a lot of different certification programs out there. So I was doing research on all of them, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up settling on IHP because I liked that it wasn't specifically aimed towards one component of wellness. It didn't solely focus on nutrition. It didn't solely focus on exercise or only the detox. I knew it was going to be a program where I would get to learn a lot about many different facets of kind of the holistic realm. And that was really intriguing to me. And the price point was obviously much better than naturopathic medical school that I would have done for, 4 years. It took me a few months, and then I was an IHP and ready to go. So throughout that time is when I just started to keep researching and learning. Like I said, my background's biology. So I'm kind of a research nerd. Whenever I probably have about 20 PubMed tabs open on my phone right now of various conditions and pathogens that I'm researching because I'm a nerd. Mm-hmm. And I just fell in love with it. When I was in Phoenix and going through my IHP, I was working at a PEMF clinic. So it's pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And that was my introduction to working with clients before, because I was still working on my certification. So I had never worked with people one-on-one before. So I got to work with the population. And I also got to be introduced to this kind of energy healing that I understood nothing about, nothing at all. It wasn't anything I was familiar with. And then I started to see how it was changing, clients' lives and my own health in addition to everything I was doing. So that was kind of what got me into, I guess, the energy portion of this integrative realm. And I've just been able to marry the two. And I've been working as a health coach for, I think, about a year now.
Wow. That's great. I think it's, we can kind of get caught up in like the titles, right? A naturopathic doctor, should be respected more than a health coach, and, rightfully so, but also what IHP teaches you, you can do a significant amount of what you would have learned in naturopathic. And that was kind of Dr. Cabral's, purpose for creating it was, I have all this information. There's so many people who want the same information and who want to share it with others. And that's why he created IHP, so that it could kind of get the message out there. But it's kind of amazing, right? If you just kind of like listen and even quiet the ego a little bit, right? You got to get to the point where you were able to help people sooner with less financial burden. And you're probably doing something very similar and with a similar impact level of knowledge now. We have naturopathic doctors that take IHP. It's, such a, like you said, well-rounded program. So that's pretty amazing. And what were you doing? So you were working for the pharmaceutical company, and did you kind of just stop that cold turkey and go right into IHP? Did you kind of, do a little bit of it at the
So
same
I
time?
was living in North Carolina when I was working at the pharmaceutical company, and we were already planning on moving to Arizona. So once I kind of had my awakening, I feel like people call it, I was still working at the pharmaceutical company for a few months. And that was really, really difficult on my heart because it felt so much out of alignment of everything I was learning. And I started to have stories of people that were like, oh, I was harmed by X, Y, and Z, or, telling all these stories about pharmaceuticals, some of which I knew that the company I was working for was manufacturing. So that was really difficult for me. I'm definitely like an empathetic person and I love people. So it was a very difficult time for me, but I knew it was kind of a means to an end. And I think that that's something that people don't always talk about when you enter this field, because a lot of us will have an awakening and a shift, and we get, we're on fire and we're passionate. And it's so easy to just want to like quit everything, drop everything and switch gears. But for a lot of people, that's not the most realistic standpoint, right? Some of us have to still work while doing IHP, or just work in order to save up to get to the point where we can do that full time. But after a few months at the pharmaceutical company, I was able to quit. And then we moved to Arizona. And that's when I started doing the program and working at the PMF clinic that I was working at. So I was doing that for a while in conjunction because I was working part-time there. So I still had plenty of time to do IHP. But another thing that really factored into my decision to do IHP was, as a naturopathic doctor, there's not licensure in all 50 states. And in my home state of North Carolina, if I wanted to come back and live here afterwards, I would essentially be functioning as a health coach because I wouldn't be able to call myself a doctor. And that was a big thing for me. I didn't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and then not be able to fully practice how I wanted and just be a health coach. I was like, well, why don't I just become a health coach and save myself this time and money and see if I even enjoy it, for one, because that's a whole other fear, right? What if you get into school, you're halfway through and you realize that that's not really how you want to help people or have an impact? So that was another big piece for me, is I just didn't want to feel stuck in what I was doing. And with IHP, there's just so much flexibility in what I can do. And again, I get to work with people from all over. If, as an ND, you only have licensure typically in your state of residence. So that really limits the population that you can work with. Whereas health coaching virtually, I get to work with people from all over, including children too. So I just feel like, my group of clients is so much more diverse and vast. And typically with health coaching too, you can make it a little bit more affordable, work with people kind of where they're at. Naturopathic medicine doesn't always take insurance, and they have to charge a certain amount for their services. So I liked that with IHP, I would be able to provide something to hopefully more groups of people, just make integrative health accessible for more, because it's really not. And especially in the South, there's definitely a lack of that holistic mindset. I have people that message me all the time who are craving that knowledge, and they just don't know, where to go or what to do about it, because it's kind of overwhelming if you don't have guidance. So some people say that the field is overly saturated and there's already enough IHPs. There's not. Like there's so many different things you can do with it, because while IHP doesn't focus on just one particular topic, you can, as a health coach, you can pick what you love and are passionate about and run with it, because we all have stories that brought us here, and no two stories are the exact same. And I think people a lot of times minimize what they can bring to the table, kind of like that self-doubt creeping in and whatnot. But I just feel like there's so many options with it. And I'm definitely the type of person who likes to have options, because I don't want to feel just stuck in one thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a great point about like the accessibility, right? Because ultimately there's this group of people who, quite frankly, just don't know. They've only been given a certain level of, information from doctors, and they have no idea that these other possibilities exist. There's some people that know these possibilities exist and don't agree with them. And then that allopathic medicine route is great for them. But there's a bunch of people that simply just don't know about this side of health, wellness, taking care of yourself, what it means to kind of live a healthful type of lifestyle. And being able to help people access that, I think, is so important. And you're right. Being a health coach allows for that flexibility. which kind of brings me to my next point. I would love for you to share. So currently you're working in an online clinic and you're doing health coaching, but you also kind of specialize in bioresonance. And again, I think it's something that a lot of practitioners, certainly on social media, are talking about. And I'm not so sure everybody knows exactly what it means or how it's incorporated. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit with us about kind of how that physiology meets, what did you say at the beginning?
The physics meets physiology. Yeah.
Yes.
So I will be the first to say I am not naturally a physics person, right? I'm microbiology. That's my jam. I took physics, enjoyed physics, but I wouldn't say I fell in love with physics. And I had an opportunity to work with this clinic because of networking connections that I made through Instagram. So that's just my little plug for people. If you're not on Instagram or social media and connecting with other practitioners, do so, because you never know what doors it could open for you. But anyway, I got this opportunity to learn about this clinic first. So they were like, we would love to present the material to you. And if you think that it's, vibing with you, if it's resonating with you, then we can maybe move further. And at first, it almost sounded like a foreign language to me because I had never heard anyone talk about energy in relation to health. Yes, I had heard about, positive energy impacting you and not letting toxic people affect your field. But sometimes at least when I hear energy, or at least I used to hear energy, I would almost have like little alarm bells ringing of, oh, that sounds kind of hippy dippy, or I don't really know what this means. It seems kind of vague. But when it's broken down in the science of it, it makes sense because, everything does have a certain frequency at which it resonates. Even our earth, you hear about harmful EMFs all the time, but let's not ignore that there's actually healthy EMFs that are radiated through the earth's core and through water and whatnot. Our own cells are supposed to have various frequencies that they need to maintain in order to be healthy and to function. So with bioresonance testing, what happens is clients send in some samples. So they send in hair, nail, urine, and saliva samples, and then they send them off to our lab. And with our technology, we're able to run those samples against over 200,000 different frequencies to find their energetic matches. So these matches are what shows up in reports that you get back. And it can come back as anything from nutritional imbalances, beneficial supplements, specific emotions or feelings, and even potential pathogens. So every marker on that report also corresponds with a specific frequency that the client's body is calling for. And then we can actually imprint those frequencies into tinctures that the clients take as part of the protocol to help bring balance back into their system. So what I love about bioresonance is it takes out guesswork for me as a practitioner, because I can literally look at the scans and see, well, your liver is flagging as stressed, and your body seems like it's wanting more magnesium. There's some resonance here for mold toxicity. We can look at all of these various pieces and see how they're interconnected. But I'm not having to just hear symptoms and say, okay, based off of these symptoms, here's what I think we should do. Because if you're in this field, you know that there's so many things that have very similar symptoms. So without some form of testing, it can be really tricky to pinpoint the problem, but also to see what your body is ready for. Some people are much more sensitive to detoxing. And just because something shows up for someone, whether it's, bioresonance or blood work or whatever test it may be, it doesn't necessarily mean that their body is ready to detox from that, right? I mean, like I briefly touched on earlier, most people have parasites, but should the vast majority of people just jump into a parasite cleanse? No, right? There's an order of operations to follow. But with bioresonance, things can come up with various frequencies that let me know, okay, this is more of a priority. Maybe here we're dealing with more of a root cause, whereas this is more symptomatic in nature. And then the fact that we can imprint these frequencies, which just means these frequencies that are flagging, we can put those into these tinctures. We're able to stack all these benefits, right? So I'm personally not a fan of having a client on 20, 30 different supplements. Like it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming. So what I can do is stack some of these scans so I can have emotional support and root cause support in a homeopathic tincture. So they're getting all of these benefits in one piece rather than having to do multiple different products there. Another thing that I like about bioresonance is the emotional component. So we know that feelings can become flesh, but also when we have symptomatic concerns, of course, it's going to have a mental impact, a neurological impact. And I love that we don't ignore that. We focus on the physical and the mental. We're not just going to put you on a cleanse or a detox and let you do your thing, especially not without some emotional support. And we see clients all the time that will have things come up on the emotion scan, and it's markers from, their childhood trauma or generational trauma that's passed down from, either parent. They have affirmations that are specific to their body. It is just the coolest thing. And like I said, I've been doing this for about a year and it doesn't get old. Pretty much every call I have, there's a client that says, oh, this is so on point because this many years ago, this happened to me and that's what this is flagging for. And every single time I'm shocked. It's not that I don't believe in the technology, but I just get so excited because I'm like, what? How is it still that fine tuned and that specific for what's going on in your body? And I also love that what we do, it's not a one size fits all protocol because that doesn't work. It just doesn't, we're all created so differently. Our genetic makeup is different. Like I said, some people are much more sensitive to certain products and whatnot. So to be able to really meet every single client where they're at and see based on the scans what is resonating for them, I love it. We can really cater towards the individual. And I really appreciate that we can do that, right? No two protocols are ever the same for clients.
Yeah. Because no two people are the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's so kind of even though IHP doesn't necessarily, teach bioresonance, right? The approach is bio-individuality. The approach
100%.
is labs, getting tangible data to find out where is this individual deficient, what has, been going on maybe for a long time with hair or, what's going on right now with blood, or there's so many ways of kind of getting to the root cause for that individual person,
right?
That it's kind of so in line. And that's truly what most people are missing, right? They've kind of been put in this like cookie cutter, medication or like here, just do this crash diet place. And what most people need is something to kind of rebalance their individual deficiencies, their, help address their trauma or, help to get rid of whatever pathogens they're dealing with. And it really comes down to, I think, when somebody knows they're getting an individualized approach or plan, also feels like such more of a kind of like wellness container because they know that someone cares about them as an individual and they're not just like another number coming in the door. And it's more of a supportive environment. And you're
100%.
able to kind of use that data to say like, here's where you're at. This is what we're going to do. And then I'm curious, do you then follow up with more scans and see what's changed and what hasn't? And is our follow-up scans part of it?
So it depends on what type of package the person chooses. So we do have some people that will do a one-time scan. And it also depends on what the clients are coming for. I would say that the majority of the clients I work with are more chronically ill. I see a lot of people who are doing all of the right things and are still not getting well. It's these people who are kind of like medical mysteries and are looking for that extra piece. So with them, typically they do multiple scans and multiple protocols. It's always fascinating because we will see differences show up, like we'll maybe see new types of pathogens show up on the second scan because we've done some of that drainage work and supportive work. So now their body is actually able to start the detoxing process. And that's always exciting to see different things come up, or we see, oh, well, your intestines were flagging as weakened, but they're not anymore. There's flagging as having much more energy flow. So we can see those changes. And it's also nice to keep up with clients on how their symptoms are changing and improving. But then we also have clients who come to us more just for maintenance. So they may not have really any crazy symptoms. It's more like they want to see what's going on, see if they can get ahead of anything. Because that's part of the beauty of bioresonance is that it can pick up on problems before they become symptomatic in nature. So, some of what comes up on a bioresonance scan can be corroborated through allopathic means, AKA blood work or something like that, right? It's very possible someone can get a thyroid panel and then we'll see very similar results in a bioresonance scan. But it's also possible that we're picking up, let's say, toxicities on a certain tooth that maybe a dentist wouldn't be able to pick up right away. So I love that aspect. It can be a little tricky to kind of wrap our brains around, right? And I think another thing to keep in mind too is just because you have a symptom in a certain area doesn't mean that that's where the actual problem resides. So some people may have, tonsil issues and whatnot. And it's like, oh, but your gallbladder is really flagging. So it's more of a bile issue here rather than just a tonsil issue. Or, your tonsils are related to your lymphatic system. So let's look at the lymphatic. And sometimes it can be tricky to wrap your brain around. I mean, it's the same thing with, people that have anxiety and maybe they resonate really highly for candida. And it's like, they don't notice maybe that they have digestive concerns, but it's flagging, it's coming up, something's there. So we do work with a lot of repeat clients, but again, it just kind of depends on what that individual wants to do. And we have a lot of different packages and whatnot. I mean, some clients want more support along the way. So, they have the opportunity to message me through the client portal and I can ask questions, which I know is really helpful because if you're used to traditional medicine, a lot of times you only talk to your doctor for maybe about 5 minutes, whereas we have an hour-long consult where I'm going over data and also listening to the client and being able to explain things to them. So clients already typically feel very validated just from that because they've been told your blood work's coming back normal. We're not finding anything on the MRI or CT, like everything's fine. Nothing is wrong. But they're still having these symptoms. They know nothing's wrong. But when you're constantly told that everything's okay, you start to really question, am I crazy? Like, am I really in the wrong? Is it something more psychological that I'm dealing with? And when we're able to go through these results, I have had clients just cry because of that relief of not only feeling heard and seen, but seeing the results. I'm not making it up. I can't come up with these scans. It is what your samples are resonating for. And it just feels so good that they finally can start to get answers and then start to kind of prioritize what they need to work on for the next protocol or protocols, depending on what they choose. But for those clients who also want a little bit of extra support, they can schedule, 15-minute calls with me or 30-minute calls. It just kind of depends on what they want. So I like that too, because even the whole process is individualized and I love keeping up with people. I appreciate when I get to see people multiple times on calls and you kind of develop friendships and you just get to learn more and more about the whole puzzle, right? Because most of us don't just have one thing. It's usually multiple things and they're all connected, but sometimes we don't get the big picture right away. And it takes some of that talking and multiple scans and kind of unraveling before we actually see all of the pieces and are able to unpack that together.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking initially about kind of like the relief of, getting answers, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the number of clients that I've given them not great information as far as like, you have a lot to work on and they are in tears in relief because they finally feel like, even though I have a lot of work ahead of me to address some of these root causes, there's finally hope that I can end up on the other side of this. And it's not just another person telling me that I'm crazy or, here, try this anxiety medicine. Maybe it'll help quiet your mind a little bit. Right. And people feel so relieved just by knowing that there's something, even though they know it's, not great. Okay. So you're going to have to do a 12-week protocol, right? For some people that could be daunting, but for somebody that's been at this for years and years, trying to get to the root of their symptoms, it's incredibly hopeful. And the author is escaping me, but the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
It's no
Talk
different.
About that all the time.
Yeah. Right. Because it sounds like the bioresonance scans, like that is kind of really at the root of what that book kind of means, which is for a long time, the body has kind of been storing this information. And that's why we, love hair tissue mineral analysis specifically, right? We use urine and blood, and that's more of a snapshot in time. But that when you look at that soft tissue, it holds information for so much longer. And when you can kind of just, there's usually one of two people. they're either like able to just trust, like they're just intuitively trusting and they're like, I'm just going to do what you tell me. And then there's others that like need to wrap their head around it. And once they've wrapped their head around it, they like totally are like, oh my God, this totally makes sense. Because it's powerful information when you're trained to understand, whether it's bioresonance or whether it's functional medicine lab, when you're trained to understand the information, it can be so revealing for so many different things. I mean, no different than how, a hair tissue mineral analysis can tell us a lot about emotions too, right? Like calcium and magnesium and the trauma or stress that the body has been under and for how long. And it's just, it's wonderful that we have access to something just more than blood work. Do you find that a lot of people that come to you are kind of already like, yep, I heard about this bioresonance stuff and I want to do this and that's why I'm here? Or can they be more skeptical in the beginning and then they kind of get definitely a little bit more trusting of the process? Or what's the usual pattern?
I think it's kind of mixed. So I have some clients who are very well versed in this universe, but maybe they just haven't tried bioresonance. So they're trying out a different type of testing to see if energetically that's the missing piece for them. I even have some clients who are practitioners themselves and are struggling to figure it out. And they're able to work on their root causes that way. But we definitely get a lot of clients who are skeptics. They're my favorite because it is really, really fun to talk to someone who is so skeptical at first and kind of questioning everything you mention. And then I get messages a week or two later saying, I feel so full of life. Like there is something I have never felt relief this fast from anything else. I am so excited to keep working with you. For the first time I feel hope. So to get those stories, it's so exciting and encouraging because it's typically those people who are going to run and tell their friends, oh my gosh, I tried this bioresonance and it was crazy. It was so accurate. I'm already feeling better. So it's definitely a mixed bag, but it's always fun. And I mean, sometimes again, like we also work with children at the clinic. So sometimes I'm working with parents talking about their children, and that can pose difficulties just when we're talking about various findings there, because I think parents a lot of times can harbor a lot of guilt, maybe for certain things that they did when their children were younger, but we don't know what we don't know, right? So sometimes we make the best decision we can and don't realize maybe the impact it could have, or maybe the parents didn't realize that they were living in a moldy home and now their child has a lot of resonance for mycotoxins or something like that. And when we look at the children's emotional scans in particular, it can be kind of hard for parents to hear, but it's one of those things too, where I always like to tell whoever I'm talking to, this information is not meant to be scary. It is not meant to make you feel guilty or to make you feel bad or shamed in any way. This is wonderful information that allows us to prioritize what we need to. We don't have to guess whether or not you need this or your child needs this. We're able to help because this is just what's coming up on the scans. So I want more people to view that information as power rather than something to be fearful of, because honestly, the whole kind of holistic space in general can be full of that fear-based mentality. And I'm very much against that. I am not a practitioner who is ever going to judge a client, no matter where they're at, right? We have some people who eat very, very clean and exercise regularly. We have some people who travel a lot, so they end up eating fast food. Maybe they're not able to move a lot because they're chronically in pain. So my job is to never judge decisions that they're making. I can always give them advice and things that I've learned through IHP, regarding diet, nutrition, and just movement and whatnot. But I'm never going to judge a client. We just meet them where they're at, give them the information. And typically they tend to do really well with that information.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things that I dislike so much about the other, side of things is so much of like the medical or allopathic, community kind of judges us for being, woo-woo or, there's all these names, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm very careful to never judge somebody else's choices because I have some clients that are like, actually, I'm going to get the hysterectomy. I can't deal with the pain anymore. Or actually, I'm going to take X medication. And everybody has to do what they feel is best in that moment. And it's really about not judging one way or the other and just holding space for the person to kind of make the next best choice that they see fit for their health. And I think that that's kind of, as health coaches, a unique place that we hold in somebody's kind of care container or whatever you want to call it, that we're able to kind of be this neutral, supportive place where we don't insert a whole lot of our opinion. We give what we know and kind of let the client do with it what they feel is best.
For sure. I mean, we're not medical doctors, so we're not trying to say like, you have to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, this is what's coming up. This is what resonates. Is this cool with you, or do we need to do something different? Because we do have some clients who come to us that are on certain medications and plan on staying on those medications. And I'm like, that's totally fine. I can work around that. Same thing with people who come in on certain supplements and want to stay on those. I mean, we have clients that maybe can't do pills. They can only do liquids. So again, that bio-individuality is key, because we're really meeting people with wherever they're at, no matter, even if they have 1 foot in allopathic and 1 foot in the naturopathic. I'm like, that's fine. Because honestly, we need both. Hello, integrative health. We're trying to integrate everything together. So I try not to demonize anything that the allopathic system does, because on the flip side too, allopathic doctors are just doing what they're taught, right? It's not their fault that they don't learn as much nutrition in school or learn about these other testings. So like in a perfect world, I would love for us to be able to work alongside, individuals and have the natural, but also the allopathic when we need that, right? If I am in a crazy traumatic car accident, I want the interventions. I want medical interventions, right? Don't put an essential oil on me if I am having internal bleeding. However, if I have a chronic condition, maybe I don't want to go right towards the medicine. Maybe I do want to see what's going on. Maybe I want to try to detox or just try some more natural, herbals or supplements or whatever it may be.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's always a time and a place, and kind of being able to discern and feel, pulled towards whatever makes sense for you in that moment is, I think, so important, having that flexibility and that freedom. Yeah. If somebody's listening and they're kind of like, oh, where can we connect or find out more? Where are all the places that you show up on social media or websites, anything like that?
So I am most active on Instagram. That is probably where you will find me most frequently. And my account is just at Hannah Killgore. So it's pretty easy. You can just find me by my name. And I post a lot on there, especially I really like funny reels, because I feel like sometimes there's a lot of people on the internet space who give a lot of information, and I like to give that information, but I don't want to seem too uptight. I want to make it accessible and kind of fun for people to interact with. So I love interacting with people on that space and kind of having fun with that. But if you wanted to work with the clinic, it's called Root Cause Clinic. And you can just go to that website, rootcauseclinic.co. And you can learn a little bit more about bioresonance testing, what it kind of looks like to work with us. There's a list of, all the practitioners who work there, including myself, for anyone who wants to check that out. And I think I also have some links on my Instagram page that can take you there. And, you can always shoot me messages. I do Q&As all the time on Instagram. So if you happen to be listening to this and have questions, shoot me a question, because I think it's so fun to interact with people. I feel like social media gets demonized a lot and people talk about how toxic it can be, but I'm like, well, that's your fault if your social media is toxic, because you control your feed, you control who you follow and what you allow to impact your own self. So for me, it has been just a fantastic tool to connect with followers and practitioners alike. So if you're not on Instagram, I definitely recommend it. Just be picky about who you interact with and follow.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you're kind of in control of the data you take in. And absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been such a great interview. I appreciate you being here on the Integrative Health Coach Success podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to staying in touch. Thanks, Hannah.
Sounds good. Bye.